What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the Frogs Up TCU Sports Podcast, recording here Monday evening. I'm Russ Hodges. That is Anthony North. We appreciate y'all joining us again, and apologies for the one-day delay. I am dealing with a sinus infection at the moment, as well as some post-bachelor party backlash / hangover. So I've been a little under the weather the last couple of days. So I appreciate your patience, Anthony. We have a big slate to get into this evening. A lot of TCU basketball content to talk about. TCU with a stunner against Georgetown. Emanuel Miller with a Hail Mary at the buzzer. And TCU walks away with a 84-83 win there. We will talk about that game. We have women's basketball content to discuss. The women's team taking down Tulsa, moving to 8-0 on the season. Historic start for the Lady Frogs, best start in program history. We have some TCU football portal updates. We have some conference championship weekend reactions and some college football playoff items to hit on as well, in addition to TCU volleyball taking the court for the NCAA tournament. So a lot to talk about this evening, and we are, I think Anthony and I are a little getting into the holiday mood a little bit here. I see we're matching with our matching red shirts. We're maybe getting a little excited for the holidays.
Yeah, I think
this wasn't planned, we promise.
Maybe it's like a little garnet and gold feel for disappointment for poor Florida State in the playoff announcement this week. So that's a tough one. We'll get into that as well, I imagine. That's the biggest story of the week, obviously. But yeah, we'll call it the holidays or supporting the Seminoles, however you feel.
Yeah, feel for all the Florida State fans out there. Some serious 2014 TCU vibes there. Some unfortunate flashbacks there for some Frog fans. But all right, let's waste no more time and get into it. This episode, of course, is brought to y'all by our friends at Charlie Hustle Clothing Company. Charlie Hustle, vintage made fresh. Go to charliehustle.com. Get your TCU Horned Frog swag. Use the promo code FROGSOWAR. 15% off any TCU item with that promo code. We also have a exclusive code through our partnership with the 1012 Network. If you use the promo code 101215 TEN1215, that gets you 15% off any item at charliehustle.com. Check that out. Lots of great stuff there. Also, On It Athlete trading cards for TCU football are live. We've talked about this for the last several weeks now. And Anthony, I know your trading cards came in the mail a few days ago. Why don't you give the fans at home a little bit of a teaser here?
Let's check that out. Yeah, I got a bunch of packs. Got some pretty terrific cards, awesome cards. Got one of the signed Nnamdi Obiizor. So that one I don't have here on me because my son has it, and he was extremely thrilled opening the pack to see that card, and it's in his sports card sleeves that he keeps. But so we've got a Josh Hoover blackout card. That's pretty cool. Savion Williams over here, kind of a cartoon looking card. That's cool. Johnny Hodges. I don't know. Yeah. Just they're very, very nice cards, and you get to support TCU athletes. And, if you're thinking about some Christmas presents, stocking stuffers you need for the TCU fan in your life, pick up some of these On It cards. They're pretty great.
Yeah. The Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales, of course, are over, but like you said, if you want to get some good stocking stuffers for the kids, any TCU fans, you can go to our Facebook or our Twitter or our website, frogsawar.com. We have some information posted about the On It Athlete cards, as well as an affiliate link that can take you directly to the TCU cards. 33% of all sales benefit NIL. So support TCU, support the football program, and get yourself a pack today. All right, TCU men's basketball hit the road to take on Georgetown in the Big East Big 12 Challenge, and this was our first real opportunity to see how this TCU team, which came into this matchup unbeaten against a bunch of mediocre non-conference opponents, this was going to be our first real gauge of how good this team is and how this team stacks up against some better competition. And this game did not disappoint by any means. TCU had a lead at halftime, but Georgetown came back. They shot the ball lights out from 3-point range. They made 12 3-pointers in the game, shooting nearly 50% from three for the game. But TCU was getting almost anything it wanted on the interior. 44 points in the paint for the Frogs compared to only 20 for the Hoyas. TCU also scored 21 points off of turnovers, 20 points on the fast break. Georgetown only had 10 on the fast break, 11 points off turnovers for the Hoyas. But this game went all the way down to the wire. A late foul with about 5 seconds left in the game led to a few free throws for the Hoyas that put Georgetown ahead 83-81. And if y'all haven't seen the clip, we've reposted it to our Frogs of War Twitter. It's also going crazy all over social media. Emanuel Miller gets the inbound pass, throws up a prayer from probably 35 feet out off one leg, calls glass, gets it in off the backboard, and TCU survives with a crazy buzzer beater, 84-83, and a play where there was a little bit of controversy regarding the ruling on this play about, whether or not this basket should have even counted. Anthony, I'll let you dive into a little bit more detail there, but ultimately the Frogs escape DC with a 1-point win and keep the unbeaten start to the season alive.
Yeah, the controversy on the final shot there from Emanuel Miller, it appears that he steps out of bounds on the shot, which is not called on the court and apparently cannot be reviewed with replay review. If it's, I don't know why that's not something that you can review with a replay. Review things like out of bounds calls. You can review other out of bounds calls through the course of a game, who touched the ball last, things like that. But you can't review a foot on the line out of bounds call. I didn't know that was the rule. I guess lots of Georgetown fans didn't know that was the rule, or continue to remind us that Emanuel Miller may have stepped out of bounds. But, that referees go to the tape and they look at the video, and clearly Miller gets the shot off before the buzzer sounds, and it results in a TCU win. I think it is a very weird situation. The end of this game was very questionably refereed, I would say. You mentioned the foul call at the one end. It is kind of a call you never see made, particularly at the end of a game. I mean, there's like 2 seconds left, and Micah Peavy is straight up, and there's really no reason for there to be a foul call there. And at the time, the game's tied. Jacoby Coles had just hit a 3-pointer to tie the game in pretty exciting fashion. Georgetown has this, what probably could have been the final possession, kind of drives the lane, chucks up a shot that's never going to have a chance, but is bailed out with that foul call. They do make both the free throws, and then it's this miracle. I mean, it really is. A loss like this would have been extremely damaging to TCU's resume in the future. I mean, we've mentioned that this is the first test, but still, even it's more of a test than anything that TCU has had, because it's a road game, it's a power conference opponent. But Georgetown is still sub 200 in the new net rankings that were released today, Monday. And, Georgetown is struggling right now. Ed Cooley, their new head coach, is definitely going to get things turned around. They have a lot of good players. They've hit the transfer portal pretty well, but it's going to take a little bit more time than, the first month of the season. So losing a game like this would have been really bad for the future resume for TCU. So escaping with the win is huge because, it's the kind of loss. It's like a seed line type loss. TCU certainly lost bad games last season, has lost bad games in the past where it made the tournament. But this is the kind of thing that when resumes are compared head to head, it could have really hurt TCU. So just escaping with the win, nobody's going to remember really how it happened, or that Emanuel Miller might have been a heel barely on the line, a little bit out of bounds. But nonetheless, it ends up being a big win, and TCU really, really needed it because this is a game you can't lose.
And, controversy aside, it was a great game for Emanuel Miller, regardless if that shot, goes down or doesn't go down. 29 points for him, 5 rebounds, was named the Big 12 Player of the Week. Also had a big game against Houston Christian earlier this past week, but he was excellent for TCU in this game. He was 12 of 18 from the field, about as efficient can get. Jacoby Coles had 17 points and 5 rebounds on 8 of 12 shooting. You mentioned he hit the big shot late in the game to tie it. And those are two guys that are really going to be carrying the load for TCU offensively. And I think TCU putting up 84 points in this game, the TCU offense continues to play really well. The Frogs are continuing to do what they did last year as far as getting out in transition and scoring points off the fast break. I think they're going to be near the top of the country in that category once again. But the depth on this team, you have Avery Anderson with 11 points off the bench. Trey Tennyson gives you 8 points off the bench as well. Both of those guys were big contributors for TCU in this game. Offensively, I think you really have to like what you're seeing from TCU right now. Defensively, though, I think Jamie Dixon has made some comments that TCU is not where it needs to be right now defensively. And TCU gives up 47 points in the second half to this Georgetown team. And I mentioned how hot they got from 3-point range. It's going to be very hard to win games when you're giving up 12 3-point shots. And we know how basketball goes sometimes. Shooters can get hot, and sometimes you just have to tip your cap and move on. But would definitely like to see the defense tighten up on the perimeter moving forward. And then another thing I noticed is that we've talked about TCU rotating the 3 big guys, Ernest Uday, Xavier Cork, and Isam Mustafa. The 3 of them combined in this game were basically irrelevant. Ernest Uday played 11 minutes, had no points, committed 3 fouls. Xavier Cork played only 5 minutes off the bench, no points, committed 3 fouls. Mustafa was the only real contributor there. He had 6 rebounds, had, I think, 1 made field goal, but had some foul trouble as well. And maybe that's just a product of how Georgetown likes to play. They have a style of play that gives big guys some trouble, but that was a little discouraging to see. And I think TCU kind of has a luxury of rotating those 3 guys because they can be a little more aggressive and not worry about foul trouble from an individual perspective. But I'd really like to see one of those guys truly emerge over the next few games. And I think Mustafa has a little bit more of a polished offensive game than the other 2 guys, but Uday's been the starter since the season began, and he's the big transfer from Kansas, and I think expectations are high for him. So we'll see if one of those big guys can really start to step up for TCU as they get ready for another big game this coming Saturday. TCU will be traveling to Canada, playing in Toronto, Ontario, against Clemson. This will be kind of a homecoming for Emanuel Miller, which is very fitting considering how well he's playing right now. But yeah, those are my biggest takeaways, I think, from this Georgetown game.
Yeah, just to follow up on the big guys, I think there was a pretty key turning point in this game early in the second half where Xavier Cork kind of got into it a little bit with a Georgetown player and got hit with a flagrant 2. I was listening to the game on the radio at this point, so I don't know exactly what happened here, but it sounded like there was a pretty clear push, and Xavier Cork kind of threw the guy to the ground and got ejected from the game. And so, yeah, he only played 6 minutes, but at the time, TCU was rolling. It looked like it was about to turn from like a kind of back and forth game to like a blowout type game. And then, yeah, TCU was up probably 13, 15 points or something at the time. And from there, it just slowly, Masood started making shots, the Kansas State transfer, and it was like, here it goes. And yeah, I think that those three guys, I don't know if it's their defensive prowess is holding them back on the offensive end, or with foul troubles early and then this ejection, if something is preventing them from flourishing. But certainly once we hit the Big 12 play, those guys are going to need to be more of a factor in the game, on both sides of the court. So definitely agree with you there. And I think that was a huge moment in the game that turned the momentum, where TCU felt like was going to run away with it. Cork is hit with that kind of frustration ejection, and things kind of ended up spiraling there. There was a period where they just kept chipping away, started, exchanging threes for twos, and, a couple of empty possessions for TCU. So definitely this game against Clemson is going to be, we said that the Georgetown test is a good test because it's an away game, it's a power opponent. But now we're talking about a top 25 ranked opponent, another undefeated power conference team, that is, this is definitely a game that is showing which side of the coin you're going to end up on in March. Are you going to, this could be battling for seed lines together, battling for bubble positions. It feels like TCU and Clemson, probably the last, 4 years or so, have had very similar seasons to a certain point that have converged in one way or another. So I think this is going to be a huge game, right here for TCU's chances to jump up into the top 25 and beyond into its resume for March.
Mm-hmm. And again, TCU moving to 7-0 on the season with this win over Georgetown. And since we last talked, TCU had a non-conference game at home against Houston Christian, I think formerly known as Houston Baptist. I think they might have changed their name recently, but we don't have to go into too much depth about this one. The Frogs cruised all the way through, 101-64. This was played last Monday, so a week ago today. The second time that TCU scored at least 100 points in a game this season. If you remember, they went over 100 in the season opener against Southern. Emanuel Miller led the way with 19 points. He also had 3 steals and 2 blocks. Micah Peavy, Jameer Nelson, they both had 15. Nelson also had 10 assists for a double-double. The categories where TCU has been strong most of the year, points in the paint, they had 60 in this game. That's what they've been doing all season long against some of these non-conference teams. They've been just carving them up in the interior. 36 fast break points for TCU in this one, 34 points off of turnovers, and then 35 points off the bench. I think just about every TCU player who got into the game scored at least 2 points. So it's nice to see everybody get involved and the team collectively contribute to a good win there.
Yeah, I mean, the Houston Christian is one of the worst 2 or 3 teams in all of college basketball, Division I. So, yes, that's a team you should blow out, and they did blow out. And, TCU, in the first release of the net rankings, the metric that the NCAA and the committee use to kind of sort teams and compare resumes, the initial rankings had TCU at 41, despite having the worst strength of schedule in the country. So, I think it just goes to show TCU is, even though it's playing bad competition, it is still beating that competition in such a way that, at least in that particular computer metric and in pretty much all the computer metrics across the board, TCU is still a top 50, top 30 level team. So once the Horned Frogs start playing better competition, if they're winning those games, TCU is going to continue to skyrocket up those rankings. I mean, the Big 12 as well is by far the best conference, so it's going to be a huge challenge. I mean, right now in that metric, the net metric, the Big 12 has number 1 and number 2. Houston and BYU are the top 2 teams in that particular rankings. So a lot of intriguing basketball to come for the Horned Frogs for sure.
Yeah, and sticking with the basketball theme, we'll transition into the women's basketball team now, which picked up another big non-conference win, taking down Tulsa 82-50 to move to 8-0 on the season. This is a historic win for the program because it's the first time in school history that TCU has started 8-0 in women's basketball. And Madison Conner was looking like Steph Curry out there in this game. 41 points for her season high by a big margin. 10 3-pointers made in this game alone. She has been playing at a very elite level to start the year. And I know a lot of the attention was on Sedona Prince prior to the season starting because of her career at Oregon and being a big time player there. But Madison Conner has come in and established her name really as one of the best scoring guards in the conference and maybe one of the best scoring guards nationally because she's had several big scoring performances for TCU early on in the season. And, even though the schedule has been a little soft, TCU has been not just winning these games, they've been blowing out a lot of these teams. And it's also nice to see everybody get involved. Sedona Prince had 15 points and 8 rebounds in this game. Jaden Owens had 11 assists. She's been frequently leading the team in assists, coming in as that new point guard from Baylor. So really nice stuff from the women's team. And, we talked about it on the last episode, I believe, after they won the St. Pete Showcase, that it's looking like TCU is probably going to finish the non-conference schedule undefeated, which would add several more wins onto a historic start for the program under new head coach Mark Campbell. So a great win for TCU, and the women's team will be back on the floor tomorrow for another non-conference game against Abilene Christian, and they'll try to move to 9-0 there.
Yeah, according to the NCAA's website, official statistics, Madison Conner is currently leading all of women's college basketball in scoring points per game by a pretty significant margin, by 6 points per game. She's up on the next player. So, yes, she is having an outstanding open to this season.
And I think with that, we'll go ahead and conclude our basketball talk for tonight. We have some football items that we're going to get into here. We have to start with what will be the first of likely many transfer portal updates, as TCU has had several players enter the portal over the last several days. Quite a few guys who haven't gotten a lot of run throughout their time at TCU, just rolling through some of the names here. Defensive back Davion Crawford and offensive tackle Jasper Lott, who was a former tight end prospect, I believe, were the first two guys to enter the portal. After that, you had safety Chase Biddle, wide receiver Cordale Russell, cornerback Ish Burdine, and cornerback Mason White. So TCU up to 6 guys in the portal. And, the two guys that stick out, Ish Burdine kind of sticks out a little bit because he transferred in from Missouri, had some experience there, just hasn't been able to stay healthy and wasn't able to get a lot of run at that cornerback spot. Mason White was a JUCO recruit who was only with TCU for 1 year, so maybe just looking to get more playing time at a lesser program. Chase Biddle and Cordale Russell are the two names that a lot of TCU fans are talking about, specifically Cordale Russell, who was the number 1 recruit in TCU's 2023 class. Really talented wide receiver. Came in and, Sonny Dykes talked about Cordale Russell and Marcus Deal as 2 big-time freshman recruits who could come in and potentially contribute right away. And, for whatever reason, Cordale Russell just was not a contributor this year. I think we all had high expectations for him coming in, and he didn't record a single reception this year. And I think he played in, 3, maybe 4 games. Another interesting thing on Cordale Russell is back when Sonny Dykes came over to TCU from SMU, he brought along multiple assistant coaches like Garrett Riley and Rashad Samples and Brian Carrington. And Jordan Hudson, who transferred last year, along with Chase Biddle and Cordale Russell, those are the first three guys that TCU got in recruiting via Rashad Samples and Brian Carrington, and now all three of them are gone, which, kind of makes sense. Brian Carrington was with TCU for one season last year and then moved on to Arizona State, where I think he's now the cornerbacks coach. And then Rashad Samples was with TCU for all of like maybe 1 month. And then he left to take the running backs coach job for the LA Rams. And then he left to reunite with Carrington at Arizona State. So I think a lot of TCU fans right now are upset with Cordale Russell leaving, much like they were with Jordan Hudson leaving last year. Although, Jordan Hudson got significantly more playing time last year. Cordale Russell, as I said, he didn't even have a catch this year. So I think people are still quick to look at the recruiting rankings and everything. And you hate to see talented prospects leave, but when you consider who TCU likely has coming back at wide receiver next year, I mean, as far as we know now, Savion Williams, J.P. Richardson, Dalen Wright, JoJo Earl, Jack Besh, Major Everhart, those are all guys who are probably going to be back next year. And if Cordale Russell couldn't beat any of those guys out on the two deep, then maybe it's in his best interest to move on.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is something a little bit concerning that for 2 years in a row, your top prospect, your top wide receiver prospect, is choosing to leave the program after just that single season. I don't know if that's you're targeting the wrong guys and maybe the evaluation's not there, or something about the way that they're getting used in the offense, that they're choosing to find a new home. But that's probably not the thing you want to see. In addition to the guys that are you mentioned all coming back, TCU also has secured commitment from Dozie Ezukanma, here local guy from Keller, that just a 3-star guy, but flipped from Oklahoma and had offers from everywhere. His brother went to Texas Tech and I think was drafted in the NFL. So that's big. And then G. Kyle Baker, the 4-star, is a big time recruit, and I think is probably TCU's top recruit right now. Maybe him or Haas Haney on the 24/7 rankings. So still bringing in talent and still with a lot of talent on the roster. Certainly, if you're looking to be a guy who is a number one somewhere else, you can't fault him for that. If you're looking for playing time, or looking for a bag, go chase it. I don't think there's. Look, I know everybody gets in their feelings about the transfer portal, and it's still new and everything, but you just can't worry about it that much. There's guys are going to transfer out, guys are going to transfer in. You will have some guys who are doing it for the wrong reasons, who are going to badmouth the program or talk smack. And you know what? You can go beat them on the field and prevent them from being in New Year's Six games. But for the most part, there's just no reason to hold bad blood on these guys. I mean, they're doing what they think is best for whatever their situation is. And, it probably, and if that's the case, that they feel their best situation is not at TCU, then it's probably best for them to go and give some other guys who TCU is the best chance for them to get their chance here in Fort Worth. So, anytime the transfer portal comes up, it starts to get a little bit dicey. And, today the transfer portal opened today, and it was frankly, at least for the Horned Frogs, and knock on wood, a little bit quieter than I expected. I think there was always this fear that like that portal would open and the floodgates would just whoosh, everybody's gone, the whole roster's gone, and that hasn't been the case. Um, I think maybe some of that is keeping that coaching staff intact. I know we talked last time out about, are there going to be changes made in the coaching staff? And maybe that some of it is with maintaining those relationships. People are staying on board to give it another go. And obviously it's just the first day. So we'll see what all comes of it. I think that the other one of these transfers that I kind of thought that Mason White was going to have more of an impact, or maybe going forward this next year had an opportunity to get some playing time with Josh Newton gone. The secondary, these transfers out, a lot of graduating seniors out of the secondary, a lot of opportunity, I would think, for playing time on the TCU secondary. So maybe he was given some advice to seek other pastures, but I thought he had looked pretty good in the opportunities he had been given. He was beaten out by Avery Helm and by Channing Canada this year and was kind of behind them on the depth chart, but I thought he had kind of had a chance. And seeing these three transfers out of that secondary, in addition to the graduating or NFL departures TCU is going to have, I think that's going to be a big, big concern spot going into next season that got to be addressed with the transfer portal, with recruiting. There's a lot of young talent on this team. I mean, we talked about all the young safeties that are coming up that are all look like they could be stars going forward, but I think that's the position to watch there. Already 3 in the transfer portal out of this team.
I love the little jab in there at SMU, and I think that'll be a nice little segue here into our next item, the results from conference championship weekend. And yes, SMU did knock off Tulane to win the American Athletic Championship 26-14. Tulane coming in as a top 25 team, but SMU not getting the New Year's Six Bowl invitation. Instead, it is going to Liberty, the Flames, finishing 13-0 in the regular season, knocking off New Mexico State Jerry Kill squad 49-35 to win the Conference USA championship. I'm trying to remember the last time a Conference USA school was in a New Year's Six Bowl. Anthony, maybe you know, but I don't know.
Maybe never.
Did UTSA? They didn't go to a New Year's Six game, right?
Did not.
No. So it's.
Oh.
I'd be curious to see what that is, because it's been quite a minute. But those were some of the non-Power 5 results. We also saw Boise State, old foe Boise State, taking down UNLV 44-20 to win the Mountain West. Really interested to see how the scheduling agreement works between the Mountain West and the Pac-2 next year, with Washington State and Oregon State holding on to that those conference reigns there. But the big results from the weekend, 2 big upsets, and that created some controversy for the selection committee. The first upset coming from the Alabama Crimson Tide, 27-24, taking down Georgia, the number 1 team in the country, Saturday evening, and moving into the top 4 after coming into this weekend as the number 8 team in the country. We also had Washington. This by rankings wasn't an upset, but Washington, for whatever reason, was a 9.5 point underdog against Oregon in the Pac-12 championship. I'm not sure why. Washington literally beat Oregon earlier this season and was undefeated going into the conference championship game. Not sure how you can favor Oregon by over a touchdown, but the Huskies came out and played really well and silenced hopefully most of the critics with this win, 34-31, clinching the Pac-12 championship and a spot in the college football playoff. Michigan cruising in the Big Ten championship game, 26-0 shutout over Iowa. I think 3 out of the 5 ESPN analysts on the McAfee broadcast picked Iowa to win this game. So
Ridiculous.
another reason you probably shouldn't watch that.
No.
But Texas blows out Oklahoma State. I watched the first quarter and a half of this one. Texas just destroyed the Cowboys at the start of this one. I think it was 28-7 about midway through the first half, and the Longhorns win the Big 12 in their final season of the conference and will go to the college football playoff, which we learned the Final Four rankings yesterday, and Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama are in the playoff. Florida State is not in. Florida State beat Louisville 16-6 to win the ACC championship and finish the regular season 13-0. They did it with a third string quarterback. But this to me, Florida State getting left out and falling from 4 to 5, I think this is a historic snub because I don't think a 13-0 Power 5 conference champion has been left out of the playoff before. And thankfully, this is the last year that we're going to have a 4-team playoff and we're going to move to a 12-team playoff next year, because this decision is just ridiculous. I mean, I don't know how you can leave Florida State out. I understand that Jordan Travis is injured. I understand that the backup quarterback is also injured. But Jordan Travis was healthy for basically the entire season. And to just kind of throw away all of the results that Florida State locked in this year because of a couple of injuries. I mean, if Jordan Travis is healthy, Florida State probably gets in. I mean, the way that folks on the broadcast were lobbying for Alabama, cough, cough, Kirk Herbstreit, cough, cough. I feel so bad for Florida State fans. I mean, it was bad enough for TCU back in 2014 to finish 11-1 and be a conference champion and not get into the playoff. But this is a 13-0, not a 12-0 team that didn't play a conference championship. This team went 13-0, won the conference championship, and got left out for 2 one-loss teams. That
It's not like they played a bad schedule either. I mean, they, yes, they're in the ACC, which, isn't like 100% excellent opponents every game, but they still beat the presumptive Heisman Trophy winner and LSU. They still beat Florida, both of which of those games were away from home. Florida in the swamp. I mean, those are high-level non-conference games to go and win on top of your Power 5 conference schedule. Yeah, it's absolutely absurd. All of that said, I'm a hypocrite because I wish all of that. Those are probably the same arguments I was making in 2014 of why Ohio State can't be in. They lost to a terrible team. They had a loss, and they were down to their third string quarterback. And that Florida State team that year was undefeated, but looked pretty bad in several of the games and probably should have lost 2 or 3 games that season. But in any case, this year, this is a much worse snub than the TCU snub. And for it to be done, I didn't watch the TV show that they put on where they announced the results because I didn't need to do that this year. But I can't imagine what the actual arguments are. The eye test that's fake. I mean, I don't know how I would be feeling if I was a Florida State fan right now. I don't know. There would be no like wall or window that was safe in my house of like throwing things. I can't imagine. Like it's unfathomable that you can go undefeated and be left out from this. And it's for the argument to come to like, well, who would you rather play? That the teams would rather have played Florida State because they're not as good. Well, that's is that really we're just basing it on like Vegas lines and recruiting rankings, and I don't know. I think it's total nonsense, but it's always been total nonsense. And you know, this particular problem won't happen in the 12-team playoff, but a very similar and problem will. And that's, they're just going to decide to put as many SEC teams as they feel like. Um, you know, I think that the way the rankings shook out this year, it would only have been maybe 3 SEC teams. But if all that matters is, well, we think you might win, you're always going to pick, okay, well, I'm going to pick the same 12 teams every year. Why would you ever pick a different team? It's going to be, well, their recruiting rankings and their talent composite, and so just put those teams in, and none of the season even matters.
I'd say
I
if
don't know.
there's
That
any
was my
positive,
soapbox on why. Yeah.
if there's any positive from this, and I think you would very much agree with me, it's that Liberty is going to the New Year's Six, not SMU. That's a nice little, shout out to Oklahoma and TCU for getting it done against the Mustangs. But yeah, it's what I was thinking was after Alabama won, I think there was some brief conversation about would Georgia still find a way to get in, but I think that conversation was pretty short. I don't think Georgia really had the strength of schedule this year to get in uh, over a Florida State team. And the rankings reflected that Georgia fell to number 6 with Florida State coming in at number 5. But it felt to me like the committee already had its mind made up before they even sat down yesterday to put the final rankings together, which that's, as you said, this isn't going to be a problem with the 12-team playoff, but it's just a very unfortunate situation for Florida State. And, with that said, we do have our field, and Michigan is the number 1 team in the country. Washington is number 2, Texas is number 3, and Alabama is number 4. So we have Michigan and Alabama meeting up in one semifinal, and then we have Washington and Texas meeting up in another semifinal. And so I guess if we're going to give our quick thoughts here on who we think will meet up in the national championship, I would love to see Michigan and Washington. I feel like Washington in some ways is like this year's TCU. They just continue to find different ways to win games, and I just feel like it's a good story. Michael Penix has had a nice season, and Washington, I think, is even as the number 2 ranked team, is probably coming into this playoff as the biggest underdog, especially considering they were
Yep.
a 9.5 point underdog in their own conference championship game. So I would love to see Michigan and Washington. And shoot, how about Washington win it all? I would love nothing more than to see Michigan, after all the BS that has transpired this year with the sign stealing and all the other nonsense, fall flat on its face in the national championship game, and Washington give the 4-team sham playoff the send off that it deserves.
I think that would be terrific. I'm less optimistic on that. I think that that's the team to root for. That's the team all of America should actually be rooting for. I know Jim Harbaugh has said his team should be America's team because cheating is good. I don't know what is he talking about. But for this playoff, it's an asterisk playoff because if the whole thing is we put the 4 best teams in, I mean, you're going to win the playoff without having to play Georgia, unless it's Alabama. If Alabama wins, all right, fair and square. They did beat the Georgia team. They took down that boogeyman. But for these other teams, they get to play in a playoff that doesn't have Georgia in it. TCU was not offered such a luxury. So, enjoy your title, Longhorns. You'll have the asterisk that you didn't beat the best team in the country to get there. Um, but joking aside, I'm hoping that Michael Penix and the Huskies can make some noise in this one, because really I've been rooting for them all season. I think they've been a really fun team to watch. Like you said, can win games in different ways. But it feels like this is the one that Michigan or Texas figures out how to win, and it's going to be insufferable to listen to their folks. But one other thing about the kind of how the playoff got set here, I think there's been a lot of negativity brought towards TCU in this whole discussion about, well, you saw what happened when TCU was there. They got destroyed. And the obvious TCU response, fan base response to that, well, that was in the final. That was not in semifinal. TCU won a semifinal. What are you even talking about? You can't say that TCU didn't deserve to be in the playoff when TCU beat the undefeated Big Ten champion. So that argument is obviously the Stephen A. Smiths, the people who follow college football for 5 minutes a year. That's coming from those kind of guys. But I do think there is some credence to, look, TCU and the blowout in the championship game, the television partners lost a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they had to find a way to recoup that money. They pulled some of that from Deion Sanders having success. And, all these things that are like, look, they're protecting their investment. They spend a lot of billions of dollars to secure their broadcast rights for this playoff. And there was no chance they were going to risk any cent being lost on this season's playoff after the debacle of last year. And that is not about TCU not deserving it. It's about ESPN's got to get its dollars from, all their advertisers. And the best way to get those dollars is to have this playoff that they have set for us. You've got a West Coast team, you've got your big brands, and conspiracy or not, I think Florida State would have been just as big a brand, in my opinion. I guess Alabama, I don't know. I don't know the scale of the difference between Alabama and Florida State that you needed to make this call, but this basically guarantees that they will have a successful sale of their advertising dollars after whatever happened last year that probably cost them, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars with how uncompetitive the championship game was. That's my piece on the conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy. It's just, this is what it is. It's a television show, and they've got to make their money, and this is how they're going to do it. And it's how it will be in the 12-team playoff too. So we just kind of have to get used to that.
And we'll be getting into bowl season here throughout the month of December, going into January. And, I'm sure we'll have plenty of bowl game content coming your way, not only here on the podcast, but also on our website, frogsofwar.com. So continue to follow us here on the podcast and also online and on social media as we continue to cover all things in college football, not just TCU. We have one last TCU item to hit on this evening, and that is the TCU volleyball team, which competed in the NCAA tournament, qualified for the tournament in back-to-back seasons under new head coach Jason Williams, who took over the program last year. And TCU pulled off a first-round upset, taking down Florida State 3-1. Florida State was the number 6 seed in the Fayetteville Regional, which featured Arkansas, the number 3 seed, dominating Stephen F. Austin, and then TCU taking on Florida State. These two teams, the Frogs and Seminoles, actually met earlier in the season, so there was a little bit of familiarity there, and TCU handled Florida State in this matchup, winning 3-1. All three outside hitters for TCU had big games. Melanie Parra had 23 kills to lead the way. Jalen Gibson had 17, and Audrey Knowles had 13. Those are your three all Big 12 hitters that got it done on the offensive end for TCU in this one. Also, Lily Nicholson, the freshman setter, with 46 assists in that game as well. So, second straight year that TCU was able to pick up a NCAA tournament victory. Last season, TCU knocked off Washington in the first round and then lost to a very, very good Wisconsin team in that Madison regional. TCU took on Arkansas, again, the number 3 seed, on Saturday, I believe, and did lose this match 3-1. So TCU's volleyball season has come to a close. TCU 17-15 on the season, finishing, I think, middle of the pack in the Big 12, but a very, very tough Big 12 conference this year. And again, Melanie Parra was first team all Big 12 this year. Jalen Gibson and Audrey Knowles were both second team all Big 12 this year. So congratulations to the TCU volleyball team. Another winning season, back-to-back trips to the NCAA tournament, which, given the scale at which this team has competed in its history, to have back-to-back winning seasons that culminate with second-round trips to the NCAA tournament is definitely a big accomplishment for Coach Williams and his staff.
Yeah, absolutely. Second round, 2 years in a row. That first round match, I watched all of it. It was extremely exciting. That first set, the way TCU was able to fight back and go take that set. I mean, Florida State had it wrapped up. They were up 5 points late in the set. They had a set point or two, and TCU just kept fighting and ended up taking that first set. And just a really exciting match. And Melanie Parra was incredible. And, I haven't dug into the roster to see what things look like for next season. But if any of these folks are around, we know a lot of them, I guess, will be. But I think this team is a fun one. So I think that was a really good season. Glad that they got into the tournament. I know that we talked about it was really 50-50 chance to kind of get that bubble at large spot, and that they showed that they belonged, and that this program is now kind of here to stay.
Yeah, looking at the roster, I guess just a quick peek at next year. Audrey Knowles was a fifth-year senior this year, so she's definitely gone. She was one of the players that was recognized on Senior Day. Julia Adams was another player recognized along with Taylor Raiola. Those are both outside hitters that have been around for a while, but looking at players on the front line, Melanie Parra, Jalen Gibson will both be back next year. Sarah Sylvester in the middle, she'll be back. Bree Green, who was a transfer from Denver and got a lot of playing time in the middle this year, I think she'll be gone as well. But you'll also have Riley Buckley and Lily Nicholson, both underclassmen, back next year. And TCU made this run and had this winning season without Riley Buckley for the last, month or month and a half because of an injury. So TCU has a lot of talent coming back at the setter position. And then Cecily Bramschreiber, their starting libero, is also, I believe she's a junior, so she'll be eligible to come back next year as well. So I don't think losing Audrey Knowles will definitely hurt. She's been all Big 12 honoree each of the last 2 seasons, I believe. I know she was a first team all Big 12 last year, second team this year. But I think with Melanie Parra, Jalen Gibson on the outside, and the talent at the setter position coming back, I think TCU is definitely well positioned to have another winning season in 2024. And I think with that, we will go ahead and wrap up our episode for the night. Anthony, any final thoughts before we transition out of here?
No, that's all I've got. Shout out. Yeah. Welcome to the party to the Florida State fans who are now experiencing what it's like to be fully left out when you think you deserve it. But I'm bummed for them, but otherwise that's all I've got.
All right. We will be back this coming Sunday to record our next episode, where we will have more basketball content and possibly more football transfer portal content, and maybe even a look back at the season as a whole for TCU and what this football team can look like in the year 2024. And hopefully we'll be at 100% health as well, at least on my end. These sinus infections, I was joking with one of my buddies over the weekend. I said, guaranteed once a year I get a sinus infection that shuts me down for probably 3 or 4 days. And here it is, coming live on the podcast. But we appreciate everybody continuing to follow us here on Frogs Up and online at frogsofwar.com. Be sure to give us a follow on Facebook and Twitter at Frogs of War. Again, charliehustle.com. Get your TCU swag. Use that promo code FrogsOWar. Get 15% off any TCU items. Also, get your On It Athlete TCU football trading cards. Use our affiliate link. 33% of revenue goes to NIL. With that, I think we'll go ahead and sign off for the evening. I'm Russ Hodges. That is Anthony North. See you next time on the podcast. We will sign off with a Frogs Up.
Get your frogs up.